Thank you, Laura. Our last presentation today is by our speaker we had yesterday, Dr. Joe Grzywacz, and he's going to talk to us about graduate school.
All right, how many folks in here have any inclination whatsoever of going to graduate school? Okay, now those people, keep them up, come on, think of this as exercise. Those are people who are thinking about going to graduate school. Are you thinking about doing it for specialization? If you're thinking about doing it for specialization, take your hand down. If you're thinking about the academic route, keep your hand up. All right, thank you very much. All right, I've actually got a couple of different things to say, and then we are just going to blast right on out of here. The first thing that I want to say to you folks is thank you. I wasn't really entirely sure what to expect at this conference, but I learned some things this morning in those research presentations, so thank you. I learned some things about how different people, when they go into a hotel room, it just sort of explodes all over the place. I heard different things about heels of various heights, and now that my daughter is getting to the age, I'm happy that I can maybe speak that language. But most important to me is seeing all the enthusiasm that's here in the room and hearing the things that you guys are already starting to work with. And I have to tell you, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not going to make that statement, but you need to know that the vast majority need to consider going to graduate school. As I mentioned yesterday, the field of human sciences is evolving right now. I mean, with the aging population, they called it the aging tsunami yesterday, I guess it was. With growing diversity, with increasing levels of poverty that are in the nation as a function of the Great Recession. That means more people are demanding services of a wide variety of different types, and some of the kinds of services that are actually needed haven't yet been developed, and so they need to be developed. And so it is changing right now. And if you're wanting to be able to have, nobody goes into this field to make a lot of money. But if you want to see to it that you don't have to have more than one job, you're going to have to get a graduate degree. All right? So just please know that. But what's most important is that as you're thinking about what that graduate degree might be, is to be very clear about what you're after. And so the first part of my comments for you today is not to say, I want that job, as much as to say, what do you see yourself doing? And here's where I'm going to give you a few examples that have come up either today or yesterday. The first example is, if you see yourself, I just want to be in there working with those parents, for example. That's how I want to spend the rest of my life. Then you're going to probably have to get some kind of a credential, because that's how you're going to get paid. And by credential, I mean a license. So think of things like marriage and family therapy, things like LCPs, licensed clinical psychologists. Think of things like masters of social work. Think of things like counseling psychologists. Because in order for you to get paid by many state infrastructures, whether it's the Department of Health and Human Services or whatever they have here in Wisconsin, or places that subcontract to do those particular services like Children's Hospital in Milwaukee that we heard about yesterday, in order to provide that clinical care, in order for you to get paid, you need to have a license. All right? Now, there are some ways that you can work around those licensures, and the person who told me about that yesterday, I'm not sure if she's here in the room, but it's extra work on your part to say, yes, the training I have is the same as an LCP, or is the same as a Master of Social Work. So the point being is that if you see yourself for the long haul saying, I want to provide direct care for individuals, whether they're children, adults, older adults, if you want to provide direct care, you got to be thinking about some sort of a master's degree that's going to give you a license so that you can get paid to do that. By contrast, if you're like me, quite frankly, that I can't handle the trauma of working with families that are being broken apart at any given time, right? It's like, yeah, I want to be aware, yeah, I want to come up with solutions, but I frankly don't have the spirit to be able to go, oh, I'm not sure I could do that on a day-to-day basis, right? The child life specialist, I don't know if I could go in there and work with children who are dying and go home and spend time with my kids. I can't do that. But you want to be involved in the creation of the solutions that those people who are strong enough to do that work, if that's what you're after, then you need more of a degree that's going to take you in the direction of what solutions can I create? And that creates two pathways for you. The first pathway is that pathway of research that many of you were scared to death about, apparently. All right? But one of the things that's really exciting about research, and here's a little bit more about my story, is I started going through UWSP. I went to Madison. I went to Madison with 100% hope and John Munson's agreement that when I was finished, there will be a job for me at UWSP. Because the idea of research scared the bejeebers out of me. I finished my PhD. John Munson's promise about a job didn't quite happen just yet, although it was still coming. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a postdoctoral degree, and I went off to the University of California, Irvine. And somewhere between finishing at UW-Madison and finishing my postdoc at UC Irvine, somewhere I turned into a researcher. And I'm not sure where it happened, and I'm not sure how it happened, but part of the reason that it happened is because all of a sudden it occurred to me that said, Joe, if you want to be able to create sustainable change, right? Working one person at a time is a great thing. You know, all health promotion people, working one people at a time, you might get somebody to lose weight, but that's not how it's going to solve the obesity epidemic, one person at a time. Sustainable change requires coming up with solutions up at this level rather than one person at a time. And I said, that's what I want to do, is I want to be able to come up with sustainable ways of supporting families, building health in individuals and families. And so that's what took me in the direction of research. And so if that's what you think you want to do, is I encourage you to look at master's programs that are research intensive. And by research intensive, I don't necessarily mean you're spending all your time out in the field, but they give you the skill set to write projects, write grants, so that you can get money to fund your research, because you might be doing that through an agency, or you might be doing that through a university, or you might be doing that through cooperative extension, all sorts of different places. But you have to have the bread and butter of what is rigorous research design. By contrast, if you don't want to go in the research direction, the world needs leaders. Part of the aging tsunami that you didn't hear about yesterday is that all of those people who are retiring soon, all those aging baby boomers, they're in leadership positions. Who's going to fill those leadership positions when they retire? Hopefully you guys. But have you received training in what it takes to be a leader? What does it take to lead an organization? What does it take to be able to assume the helm of the local area agency on aging, or to assume the leadership of the Child Protective Services Division in your county? What does it take to lead those? It doesn't take nice, soft skills so that we can really connect with those clients, because you may have to fire somebody. Or you're going to have to make hard decisions about, we only have so much money. How are we going to spend that money? Right? So if you want to go in the direction of, sort of supporting the ability for folks just like you guys to be able to do that work, you need to find a graduate program that's focused primarily on leadership. That means things like, how do you read a balance sheet? Remember the reason why I left accounting in the first place? How do you read a balance sheet? How do you manage a largely volunteer workforce? How do you, recognizing that everybody in the room is in human sciences in some way, shape, or form, how do you develop the skills that says, you know what, I really love you as a human being, but you suck as an employee? Right? How do you do that? Because that's what leaders have to do. And the challenge with many human sciences organizations these days is the leaders have made their way up to the top because they're good at what they do, not because they're leaders. And the very shape of human services today, human sciences today, is changing. They expect outcomes, right? They want to know if we're putting into place a special program for parents who have cognitive or disabilities of any variety. They want to know that it's producing something valuable for the community. Because if they're going to invest $100,000, there's somebody else who's not going to get that $100,000. And they need to be able to go, where am I getting the most bang for my buck? And while the one story at a time is important, because that's really what sells the legislature, it's the accumulated evidence that's necessary in being able to say, this is an important program. All right? So the things that you need to lead those organizations frequently, although not always, are almost the exact opposite of what takes you to be successful in that one-on-one encounter. Right? So taking a step back as far as reviewing, if you want to be able to provide clinical care, you've got to get a license of one type or another. And so as you're interviewing graduate schools, make sure you're looking at programs that are going to give you a license of one type or another, if that is your future. If your future is one that, you know what, I can't do that clinical care either because you're wired that way or whatever the circumstances are, then you've got two choices. One is, how can I contribute to changing the systems in which this care is provided so that it's much more sustainable? And you've got two options there. One is sort of this leadership route that takes you in the direction of essentially nonprofit management, because that's what it is. Most of you folks who are going to be going into human sciences are going to be in a nonprofit sector somewhere, either through state government, federal government, or a nonprofit agency of one type or another. So if you're going to lead those, you need to know what are the tools and the skills necessary to be able to lead that organization. But then lastly is to be able to think about research. And if you want to come up with solutions, again, whether it's the best way to get people to change their exercise habits, or the best way to get people reading to their kids, or the best way to see to it that older adults are not left emotionally isolated and physically isolated, that's fundamentally a research question. And if you want to be able to solve those kinds of problems, you need to think about going in the direction of research. Now, because I have to, and because it's the nature of who I am, and in part why I'm here, I've left a few capricious kinds of things about Oklahoma State University back there on the back. I'll give you just a few things to give you an idea of what kinds of opportunities are available there in the event that you decide you want to go south in the future, knowing that you can always come back like I came back. The first one is we have, for those people who are clinically oriented, we have both master's and PhD in marriage and family therapy. So those individuals who are interested in providing clinical work, our MFT program, marriage and family therapy, our MFT program places 100% of its graduates usually within 3 to 6 weeks of completing their degree. It is within, I believe, if I remember right, the top 10 marriage and family therapy programs in the country. So if you are interested in getting a license to provide care to children, families, women, men, whatever it is, there's an option that's there for you. If you are interested in the leadership route of saying, you know what, I just want to be able to be successful at managing organizations so that I can contribute to solving human problems without necessarily getting my hands dirty, so to speak, because you're not wired that way. Well, our master's degree in Child and Family Services is currently being revamped. I'm not going to tell you that it's done yet, but it's currently being revamped with an idea of placing people into what's referred to as human service manager occupations. Right now, there's a 20% growth trajectory for those particular jobs. The average salary is somewhere around $50,000 per year. So our hope is that in recreating this terminal master's degree, so it's an applied master's degree, that after finishing it, you will be able to step into essentially the leadership track. You're not going to step into the CEO of major organizations, but you'll be on the leadership track for assuming headship of those particular organizations. We also have PhD programs, and one of the things that I'll stand before you is that I direct what's referred to as the Center for Family Resilience. I alluded yesterday that I spent 10 years in academic medicine. And one of the things, and in doing that, I was able to secure, when I left Wake Forest, I think I had somewhere around $10 million worth of extramural funding on grant projects that I was running. And I had somewhere around 200 peer-reviewed publications in academic journals. And you know what? The only people who read that tripe is other academics. If you want to be able to have an impact on the world, you need to think about not only what is that research, but how does it work for families and individuals. And so one of the things that I'm guiding the Center for Family Resilience to do is to think about designing research, either at the master's level, like some of the stuff that you folks saw up here, or at the PhD level, or at the postdoctoral level, to say, you know what, all research needs to be designed with an eye towards what you can do with it. Not with the hope that someday, somewhere, somebody will take these findings and turn it into an effective intervention of one type or another, because that's garbage. Then that just sits in the libraries. Well, libraries may not be around much longer, but sits somewhere in cyberspace as far as waiting for people to read it. But rather, it's purposely designed with an eye towards saying, the next step here is, and it might be going from cells to people, it might be going from people to interventions, it might be going from interventions to policy. Where it is in that continuum of applying it in some way, shape, or form doesn't matter. But the point is that it's purposely designed to go someplace rather than just get somebody tenure and promotion. All right? So if you're interested in those kinds of things, Oklahoma State does have a place for you. But that's the last that I'm going to say about Oklahoma State, because there are lots of really good programs around the country that will do similar things for you. But you need to be aware of, what is the big picture thing that I'm after? Am I after direct one-on-one care? Am I after developing sustainable solutions? Am I after more of an academic track? Because that's the fundamental question that you have to ask yourself first. Fortunately, maybe God looked down on me and smiled, I don't know. I said, any degree will be just fine. And it worked out for me. But I'm doubtful that it'll work out for the vast majority of people. All right? So when you select your master's degree, think first, what is it that you're after? Then find the program. It need not be the best program in the country, but just find one that's specific. Because if you do good work, that good work will take you no matter where you came from. All right? I've got to rub elbows with people from Harvard and Stanford and all the really great places of the world. Yeah, they got their degrees from there, but sometimes they don't know how to do what's next. It's the people who roll up their sleeves and do good, hard work that no matter where you've been trained, you're going to have the opportunity. So don't worry about finding the best place. Worry about finding the best place to help you do what you want to do. And then after that, the rest will take care of itself. So that's all that I have about graduate programs. Any questions from anybody? And here they say you're supposed to wait 12 seconds. Bueller, Bueller. You guys are probably mostly too young for Bueller, Bueller. All right, okay.